President Trump is heading this morning to Alaska for that meeting with Russian leader Vladimir Putin. The two will meet in Anchorage to discuss a ceasefire in the war in Ukraine. They will then hold a joint press conference. This is Putin's first time in the United States since 2015. Yesterday, Putin expressed his optimism about the summit, telling his advisors the Trump administration is making, quote, energetic and sincere efforts to stop the crisis and reach agreements that are of interest to all parties involved. Russian officials are also expecting to discuss potential economic ties with the U.S. and an end to the Kremlin's exile from the Western financial system. President Trump was asked about the deal he might strike with Mr. Putin yesterday.
Are you prepared to offer Vladimir Putin access to rare minerals to incentivize him to end the war?
We're going to see what happens with our meeting. We have a big meeting. It's going to be I think very important for Russia, and it's going to be very important for us, and important for us only that we're going to save a lot of lives. We are spending a lot of time trying to get the war solved. If we can get the war solved, we'll be very happy. As far as rare earth, that's very unimportant relative. I'm trying to save lives. I think it's going to be a good meeting, but the more important meeting will be the second meeting that we're having. We're going to have a meeting with President Putin, President Zelensky, myself, and maybe we'll bring some of the European leaders along, maybe not. I don't know that it's going to be very important. We're going to see what happens. And I think President Putin will make peace. I think President Zelensky will make peace. We'll see if they can get along.
So,
David Ignatius, oh, I'm so sorry, Katie. David Ignatius, you hear what the president's saying there about having Zelensky involved. I'm in the second meeting, saying that's the important meeting. I'm curious, what went behind that? Was it consultations with Europe? And what do you take from that?
So, Joe, I'll give you first the optimistic version, and then probably the more realistic and pessimistic version. Trump has agreed now to this two-phase process that will, by his planning, bring Zelensky and Europeans in to discuss the framework that he and Putin have explored. One big question is whether there'll quickly be a ceasefire and then discussions of the details, or agreement on a package, the basic deal points that would precede a ceasefire. The more worrisome scenario is that Putin will make an offer to Trump that Trump will accept, and Trump will then, in effect, try to ram that down the throat of Zelensky and Ukraine. It will be a concessionary agreement that requires Ukraine to give up territory without providing Ukraine the security that it needs after any peace agreement. That's the biggest fear that I hear. We just don't know until the meeting happens which direction Trump will go. Will he be tough with Putin and say, this is the deal, and be prepared to impose sanctions if Putin resists? Or will he accommodate Putin's desires in a hope to have an improved relationship with his person he's expressed a lot of personal rapport with? Trump has, in the last several days, been trying to reassure Europeans who are terrified that it's going to be the second scenario of a diktat, that no, he's prepared to stand with Europe, prepared to stand with Ukraine, not going to abandon Ukraine. Whether those are just words, we're going to find out very quickly.
Katie Kay, it certainly seems that the president has been listening to his NATO allies. And a few have remarked that it's fascinating what a close relationship he's building, not only with Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, but also that the administration is building with British leaders right now. And perhaps that is moving the president a bit more toward working with Europe, working with the UK, as they come to a deal here, possibly with Russia.
Yeah, of course, you've had J.D. Vance on holiday with his family in the UK just over the past week, spending a few days with the Foreign Secretary at his private residence, the two families together. That's been seen as a good thing in the British circles. But I think actually the real key here, Joe, has been the German Chancellor and the relationship that Donald Trump seems to have built with the German Chancellor and with the Finnish President. And the Germans are in a position because of their centrality in Europe, because it's not Macron, the baggage that goes with Macron and Trump. The German Chancellor seems to have been able to both talk to Trump on a more equal footing and to bring along as well the other European partners. So it has been nearly 3.5 years since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And since then, the fighting has killed an estimated 250,000 Russian soldiers, many of whom were simply thrown to the front lines with little to no training. The total number of casualties is approaching now 1 million on the Ukrainian side. Up to 100,000 troops have been killed. Some analysts believe that the number is far higher than that. From the war's opening days, when Russia's initial assault was repelled and the world soon learned that the Kremlin's military machine had been overestimated for years, there was Moscow's failure, of course, to seize the capital of Kyiv, the symbolic fight for Snake Island in the Black Sea, and the sinking of Russia's most prized warship. There are the unforgettable images of Ukrainian civilians caught in the crossfire as their children were kidnapped and brought across the Russian border. And 2 years ago, almost to the day, President Putin is widely believed to have assassinated his former friend, the head of the Wagner military group, who had helped achieve victories on the battlefield before staging a brief rebellion against the Russian leader. So, Ambassador McFaul, as you look at this meeting, which is such an unusual meeting because this is not one where the underlings have done the work beforehand and the principals are just going to go in and sign on the dotted line. It really does seem to depend so much on how President Trump himself is feeling about the situation and how he feels about the meeting with Mr. Putin. What are your biggest concerns and what is the most optimistic Ambassador McFaul feeling this morning?
Well, the first concern is that Putin's already achieved a victory. He's having a meeting with the President of the United States of America. He's an indicted war criminal. He can't travel to many countries, almost certainly most democracies. He's now meeting with the President. Second, it's in the United States of America. So he's already achieved a lot of his objectives. He doesn't have to do anything, and this is already a victory for him. Therefore, for President Trump, he's got to get something out of this meeting to make it look like it was all worthwhile. And he's made it very clear, I think he's right, getting a second meeting with President Zelensky, that is the goal. And I wish him success. I want this war to end. It cannot end without Zelensky in the room. It cannot end without Ukrainians negotiating. And therefore, getting to that second meeting, I think, is the key outcome that we are all looking for.
Of course, we have no guarantee that there will be a second meeting because to this point, the Kremlin has refused to sit down with Zelensky. They don't want to legitimize his government. So foreign policy scholar Hannah Notte writes a guest essay in the New York Times with this headline: Putin should be careful what he wishes for. It reads in part this way: as Mr. Putin indulges his illusion of total victory, Russia's global throw weight suffers. In September 2023, Russian peacekeepers largely stood by as Azerbaijan took control of a disputed enclave in the Caucasus. Last December, as rebel forces approached Damascus, Mr. Putin abandoned Syria's brutal dictator, his longtime ally, Bashar al-Assad, to his fall. In June, Russia took a back seat as Israeli and U.S. airstrikes hit Iran's nuclear and military facilities, denouncing the attacks but doing nothing to help materially. Mr. Putin has long insisted that Ukraine will be his. But in a world shaped by Mr. Trump's mercurial temperament and might is right principles, his obsession may cost Russia more than he has bargained for. So, Mr. Ambassador, no question, Putin is seen as much weaker today than he was at the beginning of this war 3.5 years ago. The military has been exposed. The economy's in tough shape. But to your point, he's already achieved something of a victory, readmission to the international community, at least to a degree, by getting this summit one-on-one with the President of the United States. We know that President Trump in recent weeks has been tough rhetorically on Putin. We know that he put together some secondary sanctions on India. That's good, many experts say. But we also know that for the majority of his decade on the global stage, Trump has been extraordinarily deferential to Putin, particularly in the only other time they had a one-on-one summit, which was Helsinki 7 years ago. So that's the fear that so many Europeans have expressed to me, is that Trump, though saying all the right things right now, clearly guided by Europe to get to this point, but he's going to get in that room with Putin, and he may not talk tough.
I agree with your European friends. I feel exactly the same way. First of all, rhetorically, he's been tough, but in real actions, he's done next to nothing to put pressure on Putin. Those secondary sanctions were threatened. They haven't been put in place. The better strategy would have been to put sanctions in place before the meeting. The better strategy would say, we're going to be with Ukraine for as long as it takes. By the way, the majority of Americans agree with that statement. The better strategy would be to say, we're going to increase weapons to Ukraine to create leverage before the meeting. President Trump has done it exactly the opposite. And I hope he's got a strategy. Maybe it'll work. I don't know. But it suggests to me that Putin is in a very strong position. He doesn't have to agree to anything. And this is still a victory for him. Trump needs something out of this meeting. And when you need something out of the meeting, that gives all the power to the other side of the table.